Hello everybody, welcome to our vlog. And we are here to talk about Honor Thy Father. It is one of the best films in 2015 and has multiple accolades internationally and locally.
So basically, the film synopsis talks about how Kay and Edgar, the two main characters, have been in financial trouble and have finally been having the big break they needed. But as this happens, Kay has been selling an investment of her father to her fellow parishioners, promising big returns. Kay makes big money till everything falls when Edgar visits the in-laws' house, finding the house ruined and the father of Kay gone. The start of the emotional and financial roller coaster of the family begins when the friends of Kay come back and ask for their money. Realizing they were scammed, the friends resorted to assault, robbery, and death threats, pushing Edgar to the limit. Edgar goes back to his family for help and plans a criminal act as a last resort to make all their problems go away.
According to an interview of director Matty with the Sun Star Philippines, the title Honor Thy Father was based on the promise that Edgar made to his father about returning back to his home, where their family's criminal enterprise is based. Although, it can also be argued that the title Honor Thy Father is a subtle foreshadowing of the role of religious institutions in the film, particularly because of the phrase Honor Thy Father is one of the 10 commandments mentioned in the Bible.
Honor Thy Father also focuses on a fictional church called the Church of Yeshua, who has amassed a sizable following in the Philippines. The church constantly reminds their followers that they need donations for their new church in Metro Manila. The film shows how much power they hold over their followers and exposes when families were seen to be convinced that the only way that Yeshua will bless them is by giving a lot of money. So this vlog is not focused on the Ponzi scheme in this movie, but rather the power of the church and the resistance against it, as seen in the movie. But before going deeper into our analysis, just how brave was Eric Matty in showing this movie in this country?
So, according to Professor Susan Russell, the Philippines is the only Catholic country in Asia with 85 to 90% of our population being Christian. It was in the Spanish rule where Filipinos were introduced to Christianity through strategies such as reduction, and after the American colonial rule, nationalists tried to Philippinize Christianity by giving out more relatable gospels. These gospels would tackle problems such as poverty and would be used by Filipinos as a guide to their problems. In quotation, in any case, they, like many Americans, who become enamored with TV evangelists, are looking for messages that promise not only salvation in the afterlife, but a better living standard in this life.
So Doc, let's get into it and let's dig deeper and see how power and resistance plays in this film.
So the beginning of the film immediately shows the effect that religion has and its power on the daughter of Edgar and Kay, Angel. The daughter is forced to say sorry for hitting a boy that harassed her, and the teacher said it is not the Christian way to answer back and it is not the image of Mama Mary to hit people. Edgar, the father, is seen to show some signs of annoyance with the principal as she uses religious lessons as threats to his daughter.
It is interesting to note that the church has been in power since the time of the Spanish, as shown in the literary works of Jose Rizal in Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. The friars were the most powerful people to live in the Philippines during the Spanish colonization. In the book, it is mentioned that the friars had a monopoly over education, which really shows that the power of the church has had really deep roots ingrained in every Filipino kid due to their influence and education, just like in the film.
Sinabi ko, by the power and the words of Yeshua, Satan, I bind you and cast you out.
By the power and the words of Yeshua, Satan, I ban you. These are the words used by the bishop. He used this line because of the doubts that some people have with regards to the 1 million a week needed by the church for their new parish in Metro Manila. The bishop then moves on to bless the fellow members that donated large sums of money. This scene implies that more money donated would mean more salvation and blessings for the family. The use of manipulation by the Church of Yeshua was highlighted by Matty in this scene. This concept is not new to the Catholic Church since its rich history involves a similar idea such as indulgence, which can be dated back all the way to the 11th century. This is the quote by Covolo in 1999.
In the same scene, Eric Matty uses his power of cinematography by using an unusual point of view coming from Edgar. Edgar did not belong to the same kind of crowd as the churchgoers. It was constantly reiterated in the film that he comes from a different background. The director displays Edgar so vividly, such as he made Edgar stand out of the church scene, wherein the churchgoers would be sewing side by side while Edgar was just still in the middle, really highlighting that he was an outsider.
The following scenes show that the main characters find out how they have become victims of a Ponzi scheme. Fellow parishioners that have invested in K are now angry and ambush the family in their home. The faithful, God-fearing parishioners resort to violence and robberies, beating Edgar to the point of unconsciousness. The irony of these religious people are highlighted in many scenes, showing how many people are quick to resort to violence when it's convenient to them and when it involves money.
Moving on to the second half of the movie, we can see Edgar's character development, and it really shows how from being a quiet, timid character, he becomes a vocal, conflicted, and angry one. The confliction of guilt and desperation was highlighted by Matty's use of multiple sounds to disorient the viewer, giving the audience a feeling of confusion when Edgar was robbing a bank.
This confusion and character development of Edgar, used by Eric Matty, is interestingly similar to the style used by Jose Rizal in his works Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. There is a parallel similarity on the character development of a peaceful activist in Crisostomo Ibarra who transitions into a radical revolutionary in Simon.
So after trying to rob a bank out of desperation, Edgar returns home to his wife, who questions his gun. He then shouts, "Hindi tayo tutulungan ng Diyos mo." This was the first explicit scene showing Edgar's resistance to the wife's religious practices.
In the next scenes, as a hope for proof that the church will help, Kay comes up with an idea to ask for help from the bishop by asking if they could loan money that their family donated. However, instead of showing genuine concern, the bishop started blessing them, banning Satan, and saying to keep their faith while raising his hand up in the air. So Edgar, being fed up with this almost blasphemous act, attacked the bishop and strangled him, really showing that he is done with the Church of Yeshua. So for us viewers, this scene would be the most disappointing scene for everyone, as Eric Matty really showed a great job of how he used satire and the power of the bishop in this scene.
This exact scene actually happens in Noli Me Tangere chapter 34. In this chapter, Ibarra lunged towards Padre Damaso, threatening him with a knife. This is the first time Crisostomo Ibarra resorts to violence against anybody in the story, which highlights his resistance to the friars. We can really see the similarities in this transformation of Edgar and Ibarra's character in the two stories. Both experience tragic events that push them to the edge, resulting in both of them becoming violent and aggressive people.
As a sign of desperation and nothing really working for them in their town in Baguio, Edgar now seeks the help of his family in Bontoc. Interestingly, a version of Ama Namin plays in the background. This song is actually a concept of what happened in the scenes before. This prayer talks about how worshiping the Lord and obeying His commandments will be rewarded with blessings. The last verse is about forgiving our sins and not leading us to the test, which is where Edgar is now headed. The following scene makes use of visual symbolism and the unsaid in expressing the confirmation of Edgar's resistance to the church. For instance, in the scene we see how Edgar is exposed to the lavish and abundant lifestyle of the pastor. He sees firsthand how much the church is benefiting from the collections. More importantly, you can see the darkness also in his eyes as he looks around. Despite the explicit dialogue of Edgar and the pastor making amends, the unsaid message shows Edgar reaching his breaking point, and that he knows exactly what needs to be done, which leads to the climax of the film.
So in the one of the last scenes, it is seen that the actual plan was to steal from the church. So for us, this is the strongest and clearest representation of Edgar's resistance to the power of the church in the film. It is the first time the audience is exposed to the real plan of Edgar, which is to steal money from the church. Interestingly, a key point of the film lies in the difference of how Edgar reacted to robbing a bank versus robbing the church. This difference, despite being not obvious to the naive audience, emphasizes the idea that targeting and stealing from the church is acceptable for Edgar. On another note, in the last scene, we can see that there are different powers evident in this movie that could be reflected in real life. Implicitly, the plate number of the car indicates the position of power of the congressman that Edgar ends up killing. This is a brilliant insertion of another player in the abuse of power, the state. This is important because the state is quite influential in Philippine society and could not simply be left out despite the film's focus on religious institutions.
In the final scene, a song entitled Tao by Army Milyare is played. At the beginning of the song's lyrics, a person is related to a bird in a way that flying is to dreaming. We can see the resemblance of this lyric to the movie wherein Edgar is trying to break free from his family's criminal enterprise by moving away and dreaming of a better life. However, in the end, things turn around, making him resort to his old criminal ways. This is also represented at the end of the song, wherein just like a bird, a person also dies. Sasaktan mo lamang, puso ay huwag sugatan, ito'y laro lamang sa mundong makasalanan. These lyrics represent the mindset of Edgar as he was planning the heist. It reached the point that Edgar had no other choice but to take part in this so-called game of life, wherein in order to save his family, he must do the unthinkable and the unforgivable. Isip ay nalilito. Pag nakakita ng bago, lahat ng bagay sa mundo ay isang malaking tukso. It was a fight for survival for Edgar and his family, forcing Edgar to do such an act. The sinful world we live in causes people to act out of their human state and do things that they never imagined they could.
So as a final note, Eric Matty does an exemplary job in relaying the message of power and resistance of religious institutions to a Filipino audience, especially because of the subtle and explicit delivery of the message. In this film, the church was never portrayed as an outright evil. Instead, Eric Matty would leave various details and representations throughout the film to let the audience subconsciously realize the theme.
So this method is effective because it allows the audience to receive a message that is considered offensive to many Filipinos. If the film was too fixated in portraying the abuse of the church and the resistance against it, then it would have been likely for many people to simply reject and not even consider the message of the film.
On the contrary, a journalist named Aris Rufo wrote a book called The Altar of Secrets, which is a more explicit and aggressive delivery of the theme power and resistance in religious institutions. This book uses numerous anonymous sources on claims against priests and bishops. It is another form of literature that blatantly exposes the wealth, corruption, and sex life of these officials.
So what do you think? Do you agree with the subtle style of Eric Matty, or should he have been stronger and more compelling in the delivery of the message? Put your comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking to the subscription button. Thank you.